Can you hear it? The earth, it's calling you to leave your material life. So answer its call and hop into your VW bus and drive. Go see the world. Go to Nebraska and see its cornfields. Go to Kansas and guys, there's literally nothing in Kansas. Don't go to Kansas. How about those fried pies in Oklahoma? You know, now that I think about it, maybe the Midwest isn't the best place to do a van life episode. Anyways, enjoy this podcast where me and Joey talk about #van life.
Foil is made of aluminum. No, wait. Foil is a math function.
You went so much harder.
Math functions for science, and science is used to make aluminum and turn it into different kinds of metals. Cars are made of metal.
Used to make aluminum?
Science is used for everything. What are you talking about?
I feel like you can dig it up and then like separate it, and that's not like quite science.
That's still science. That's a physical change. That's what science told me.
That's fourth grade science right there.
Yeah. That's the last time I paid attention.
I was in a class called science, and that's where I learned that. So, science.
Big brain. Big brain boys back at it again.
Back at it again. And we're here to teach you things if you weren't ready for that.
About
van life. #van life. So maybe this is a big brain boy topic.
Is it a big brain boy topic?
Because it's got hashtag in there. We're like, boom,
is
big brain boys.
It's a big brain. Everybody knows that scientists love their hashtags.
Honestly,
you know what's great is that TikTok. So you'll find like any basic blonde girl will have 20,000 followers. Guess how many NASA has? The official NASA page.
33.
No, it's bigger than 33.
Are they killing it or are they doing awful?
They have just over, I want to say 2,500.
Okay.
I am doing better than NASA on TikTok.
Why is NASA on TikTok?
Because it's it's another social media platform.
Let's get them kids onto space.
Yeah, I mean, why is NASA on anything? They're just trying to promote their research and stuff. They have
That's fair.
videos and
But I just feel like TikTok is so just far removed. Like Facebook, it's you can do an intellectual post or you can do a cool Insta pic. Yeah, but on TikTok, it's just here's 7 seconds of science, I guess.
Well, it's not 7 seconds. And so they have time to do things, but I feel bad, dude. They're just
Poor NASA.
Hey, sorry, unless people get onto science TikTok.
The algorithm's not the only one hurting NASA. There's a lot of people going for NASA
That's
right
fair.
now.
Unfortunate for NASA.
Honestly.
Unfortunate for space.
Poor NASA.
But we're not talking about space.
No. We're talking about van life.
We're talking about terrestrial travel.
Yeah. Get out of here. Non-terrestrial travel.
Extraterrestrial travel?
Nope,
non-terrestrial travel.
We'll do subterrestrial as well. That does not count. There's extra, there's terrestrial, and then there's sub.
What's sub?
The Underdark.
Oh.
To you D&D players.
I forgot how much of a nerd podcast this was.
Well, it's going to stay that way because I'm not changing.
Do you record a clean intro, where you intro the topic and edit it? So you don't have 18 minutes of us talking about D&D.
Isn't that what it is? We just that's the show. Is that we just don't talk about the subject for long enough to where we can finally talk about the subject in a short enough amount of time where we don't have to ramble.
I tried to upload 800 photos to Google Drive yesterday, and the estimated time it gave me was 123 hours. And I was like, oh,
please no.
For those of you at home keeping track, that is 5.5 days, I think.
It's a lot of days.
Yeah. It's not as much, 123 hours sounds more impressive, but still, it's ugh.
That's awful. But you know how you could get away from all those woes?
How?
Not living in a house. Living in a van instead. #van life.
#van life.
Big brain topics.
Big brain, hashtag big life, big van.
#big brain small van. Big brain tiny house.
#big van small house. #no house.
How small big brain.
So tell me more about vans. What is van life if you were to put a definition on it?
Van life. It's kind of in the name. It's separating yourself, getting a little bit off the grid, freeing yourself from a house, from a stationary job sometimes, and being a nomad, living in a van, going from place to place. Yeah, it's supposed to be a more minimalist, a simpler life filled with adventure and things like that. And it's really popular on Instagram because you can have this cool retro van. You can take pictures of that, and then you can drive to beaches and woods and stuff and just show all these beautiful places you're at. And so that's kind of where the #van life comes in, is because it can be really beautiful and Instagram worthy.
Yeah, it's like big with influencers. Like a lot of like almost everything I saw about was simply about people who do it for the clout almost it's like I live out of a van so that I can take these beautiful photos and I can travel wherever I want, and it's like always like on Instagram or YouTube, or it's like they're even on TikTok a little bit. There's like things in my van that just make sense. And it's like, I don't have a toilet because who needs that?
Honestly. But then I'm like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. And so I'm like, why not do a podcast about it? Why not learn about it?
Yeah.
And then share that information that I learned with the people around me. Because lately I have had that like kind of thought. I'm like, okay, my work that I do is not something I love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm young and I don't need to like build a career right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, what if I did just like go live in a van and like explore the United States and Canada and things like that?
Yeah.
And
tell you what, we could do a podcast from anywhere.
We could do a podcast from anywhere.
It's true.
We could make our van very insulated.
Podcast, but in a van. Podcast, but anywhere. Podcast, but on a mountain. Podcast, but driving.
Ooh, dangerous. I feel like it wouldn't be that dangerous.
I don't think
it wouldn't have to be.
I don't think it's dangerous to talk and drive.
You can't talk and drive.
Oh no!
What have my parents been doing my whole life?
Well, there are people like, I know you've recently started watching a little bit more of Rhett and Link every now and then on Good Mythical Morning.
Mm-hmm.
Link cannot physically do anything and talk, and there's like a whole compilation about it where he like starts gesturing with knives, and then Rhett's just like, no, see, here's how you do it. You put the knife here. When you're talking, you gesture with the other hand, and you leave the knife hand stationary.
Please do not kill anybody.
Yeah,
I beg you.
And like he'll just be like sitting there, and like he'll start talking, but then once he starts doing whatever activity, he just
freezes.
Yeah, he freezes up. And I don't understand that level of one-track mind. I think it's because I'm ADHD, and so I always have to be doing 8 things at once.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, for some people, it could be dangerous in that regard.
Podcast on the road is a maybe.
I could do it. I could do a podcast on the road.
I think it'd be kind of fun. I mean, you're not doing anything anyways.
Yeah.
It's when your like mind is freest.
I think we would have to like really insulate it though, because like cars get pretty loud on like the freeway and stuff.
Yeah,
but that sounds cool. Living out of a van, doing what you want.
Yeah, I just recently went to Arizona, and I was like, this is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've seen anything as beautiful in my life.
I love Arizona.
And I was like, why am I coming back to Kansas? You know? And I feel like everyone thinks that when they leave Kansas. They're like, you're not in Kansas anymore. And they're like, yeah, because I got out.
Yeah.
I won.
I won.
That was the game. Get out of Kansas.
I mean, maybe Arizona isn't the greatest place to move to, just because like the political climate right now isn't amazing. But like still like out of Kansas.
And van life in the US right now just seems like a real rough situation. It's like, okay, we have a lot of like social political movements going on. We have a pandemic going on. Our government's very unstable and like brutal police action going on. So I could see where like right now is not the time to do it.
For sure.
But I feel like there are some like pros and cons, you know? It's like for me, before like researching, I was like, okay, it'd be adventurous. You don't need a ton of space. You'd be like right with nature. And I don't know, just be like a simpler life. You wouldn't have to like clean a huge apartment because you just have your little van.
Yeah.
Things like that.
But so just starting off then, just for the record, would you van life? Would like
before or after researching?
Before researching. Were you interested in van lifing?
Yes.
Okay. I would say no, just because of my like knowledge coming into it. I'm like, I really like having space. Also, I'm like, I'm an editor. I work at a computer a ton. Like,
yeah, you're like a technophile. So if you like didn't have your like internet coming in and plenty of things to use it on.
Dude, we spent a whole segment of the podcast before we even started talking about this, talking about how much I want to Google Fiber. like that's how much it matters to me. Like the power could go out, fine. But if I like immediately get good internet as soon as that power comes back, that's all I care about. It's fine.
Well, Joey, your like livable temperature is like 10 degrees. It's from like
it's
60 to 70. Like, that's where I can live.
Yeah. I mean, I like there's like indoor temperatures and outdoor temperatures. So indoor temperatures should always be between like 60 and like 75. Outdoor temperatures should always be between 60 and like 85. But
so van life might not be great because you don't want to like you don't have a ton of extra power to be using on AC or.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's like what are the things that you have to prepare for when like dealing with van life? Things that people might not think about, what is the barrier for entry.
Right. So I think the first thing you do is you got to get a van.
Okay.
I think that's like a very like first place to start is like, how do you get a van? You buy
I'm
one.
pretty sure I know how to get a van.
Yeah. That's like a big part of it. And like getting the right van, I'm sure is like a huge piece of success because a few of the things I've heard is like, oh, I just kind of hopped into this and then I didn't realize like the things that I did need and things I didn't need. And then I just like got burnt out so fast because it was so stressful the entire time because I wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah, I think something about the van too that you need to think about is like, okay, I've got this van. I'm going to be putting between, like, it's not a cheap conversion. It's between like $1,500 on like the super low end and like 2,500. In this particular example, they converted a $30,000 van.
Well, that's not very, yeah. I mean,
But
because I've heard of like someone bought like a $6,000 bus and put in $6,000 into it. And I've heard of someone else who bought like an $8,000 and put like $1,000 into it.
yeah.
And so I think it can really be whatever you want.
Yeah, but it's all depending on like what you're trying to do. So like if like this bus person say they're like, okay, I've got this space and I don't really care about it being in like a Sprinter van that's like sleek. I'm okay with it being in a bus. But if you're like, oh, I want to live in something that looks nicer or whatever, because they bought a Mercedes Sprinter for $30,000. I'm like, what a great deal! I'm like, holy shit, $30,000.
That's a lot of money for just like getting into van life. If it's not something you're positive that you want to do, that's a lot.
Yeah, and like you have to like plan it out, figure out what's going where. It's like a whole mini engineering project to like allocate space to these things because you have to insulate it. You have to add your own electric system if you want that, if you can afford that. Plumbing, like all of these things, you're basically building a tiny house on wheels. So it's like an engineering project to the nth degree. Like planning how to like do electric for a house and plumbing for a house is complicated enough. But now you're on wheels on something that's doesn't have a stable connection to these things.
And I mean, I think sometimes you don't have to like do a full reno. I think you can buy a bus and go or buy a van and go. Some are kind of made for that, but yeah, it can really depend if you're trying to make something for your needs and like you just buy like an old school bus and you want to gut it and like make sure that you can put a mini fridge in it and make sure you do have a way to get a shower like on the outside. Like you could also just get like a little something that you'd see in School of Rock kind of van.
Yeah.
And just like drive that around with a bed in the back.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, and there are like plenty that I found anyways going around. It's like it's literally a bed, like a really tiny kitchen, and like that was it. But what they were doing is like, oh, we're traveling across the country. We'll just like stop places and rest. This will be like our mini motel, essentially. And if you're doing that, that's great. But like some people are like, oh, I'm living out of this. This is my entire life. And of course, some of these people also have like a physical like connection or whatever. Like they've got like, oh, we've got our office space that we go to once every like couple months or whatever. Because another thing, on the road, you have to find a way to make money. You can't just always like put nothing into this
because
or, like,
yeah,
put everything
like
into it and get nothing out.
I think the big thing that you can hear is like, oh, van life, no rent. And so it's like, oh yeah, I guess you wouldn't have rent, and that's like a huge expense because for us, what is it, like $800 a month?
Yeah.
Then it's like, what are your daily expenses? And that can be food, gas, a phone bill if you're trying to work from your computer or laptop, trying to work remotely.
Absolutely.
Those can all be huge expenses that add up. But depending on where you were living before, if you're trying to live, say, in like Central California, those still could not even add up to your rent. And so it really could be a lot cheaper life.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I one of the ones that I saw that actually broke it down. But yeah, they broke it down to like their insurance is like one of their biggest expenses for their business and for their vehicle, covers all of their stuff because they considered their van to also be a business. Like they're able to write it off as a business expense because one, they make money off of it by doing YouTube videos, and two, they had like some like coffee thing that they did on the side where part of them having their van was them going across the country, meeting with coffee shops and trying to sell them like their own brand of like chai tea and be a distributor. So they had like that, and when it all came down to it, like food and their phone bill was the base expense. It's not quite 1-to-1 between like if they were to like have an apartment or something, but the price is almost the same. And you also put in this extra whatever to making a luxury van.
For sure. But you got to think that if they were living from home, theoretically, all those expenses still would have transferred over. I think cutting out rent really can save a lot of people a lot of money.
For sure. No, I'm not saying like that to like discredit them at all. I'm just saying like that would to me was like some of the most interesting numbers, was like how close it comes to it. And the trade-off is you get an apartment or a house, like instead of living inside of this, 8x5 space that happens to be a van. And to me, that trade-off is like, okay, well, you also get like to see these great spots and like go and like see these beautiful, beautiful sights and stuff, which for some people is like a huge trade-off. And I think that's great, especially if like you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you have these like day-to-day expenses, then you have to find a way to pay for them. And so there are like different job opportunities that you can take on the road. And I think in today's like economy, it's probably easier than it has ever been to be able to do things like that.
Absolutely.
With gig economy, normal jobs made remote, different like apps and internet providers that can connect you with people who need jobs done, even if they aren't remote jobs. Like you theoretically are a photographer, videographer. You could very easily go online and find jobs in different places, and you could drive to those jobs. Whereas in a previous climate, in say the 90s or 70s, you couldn't have done that because you would need like local news ads and things like that to get your word out there.
Yeah, and it's like you could have done it, but it becomes a lot like harder. There's more barriers. Whereas now, I think if anything, like COVID has kind of shown us as like, oh, the amount of jobs that can be done from home is pretty high. Like there's like office jobs. Did you find a list of any jobs?
Yeah, I did find a list of jobs, and so
let's read those off.
I saw a lot of like creative style jobs, and so very clearly, since it is like the hashtag van life movement, you got vloggers and bloggers and brand reps, things like that, that are literally just going out there being influencers, and that can make a lot of people a lot of money if they can get the following. Although I'm sure a lot of people try and do that and don't end up as being as successful.
Yeah, I think the barrier for entry on that is like simply be a fit, attractive human being.
Yeah, the barrier for entry is something that you can't really control.
Yeah, it's like genetics. Get good genetics. Have like be like super into like yoga.
Yeah, be good on social media. Like know how to use it and take good photos and things like that. Then like you also have like all your normal jobs that you can do remotely, kind of like I said, your photography. You could be like an office manager. You could be kind of like an accountant of sorts, and you could do all those from your laptop in your van. And those are the ones where that would get you a super high phone bill probably by trying to like manage all of that. The thing that I found the most interesting and would probably be like the thing that would draw onto me the most is like seasonal and outdoor jobs. So you could like go work on a farm and help with harvest over the summer.
Yeah.
Or you could go out to an orchard and help like cut tobacco leaves or something like that. Or you could make your way up to the ski slopes and run lifts for their busy season.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
And then you could be like a seasonal van lifer where it's like, oh, for 3 months I go to like California and work in the vineyards. And then for the winter I drive back up to Colorado and I work in the ski slopes. And then in spring and fall I have enough money to just kind of do whatever I want. And so I thought that seemed really interesting and like would probably be like the more enjoyable, embracing it kind of way to do it.
Yeah. To me, that's almost like the more reasonable way too. Something I found a little bit that we can touch on later too is burnout is so real in this kind of like van life, hashtag van life, hashtag big brain, because like people get into it and they're like, oh, I'm going to travel all the time, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, a lot of people, especially for an influencer, they're planning their trips based on what looks the best on camera. It doesn't look as cool to drive from like Kansas to Colorado, but it does look really cool if you travel like through, some people go to Europe and do it, and like that kind of stuff, or like travel like along the coast of California. And so like you can end up like being burnt out if you're planning those trips. Whereas if you were to just be like, oh, I'll like plan those trips still, I'll do it, but I'll only do it for, 4 months of the year. And the other 6 months I'm doing seasonal stuff, or like do it during the 4 months in transition. You do like the 3 months in the spring, 3 months in the fall, travel in the summer. And like I think that's probably, to me, seems like the most stable, like repeatable kind of thing. Like you can maintainable. That's the word I was looking for.
For sure. And I was like, yeah, those are like jobs that are like good enough for a little while, usually pay decently, but you would get burnt out from just doing that job if that was your only job. And then you'd also get burnt out from just van life. So I think the mix could be really nice for like a young person trying to do both and like be adventurous, but also just kind of work a job that can like make them enough money to feel comfortable.
And that really appeals to me because I have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit where I'm like, oh, I want to do photography, I want to do videography, I want to do podcasts, I want to do like D&D stuff, I want to make video, all of
Mm-hmm.
these like different avenues of business and design or whatever. And that working seasonally at different places would give me a chance to like kind of not get bored of something because I'm really good at working a job at a different place for 6 months at a time. I've kind of done that a little bit anyways, doing like marketing stuff. Oh, I'll work like 6 months here and I'll work 6 months there. And in between, I'm doing like photography or whatever. And I even like worked at Eat Street to kind of like help smooth over the cracks in my finances just to make that extra money. And so if that's like what you get out of a van life, I'm like, oh, well, that part doesn't sound like half bad at all. It sounds like you're getting a lot of like real world experience, meeting new people, super extroverted shit that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that part almost sells me on it.
Some of the things that I was thinking about was like the skills you would need. And I think like extroversion is like a skill you'd kind of need because things can go wrong. You're going to new places constantly. Like you would need the ability to just like meet other van lifers, connect with like the clerk at a gas station to find like where a good place to park would be and things like that. Some other skills you'd need would be like being a relatively competent mechanic because vans break down just like your house. But when you're in a house, it's very easy to get a plumber, things like that. Whereas if you're in a van, theoretically, you can break down anywhere at any time. And usually if you're just trying to do it kind of on a whim, you're going to get a cheaper, older van that is more prone to issues like that.
Gotta keep up on the maintenance of your vehicles. Get your oil changes every like 3,000 miles or 6 months, 3 months?
Yeah, I think it's like 3 to 5 in like 6 months. Yeah, me too. I was just looking at it recently and I was like, oh boy.
But yeah, so you have to be better about it than we are because you're literally on the road 100% of the time if you're living out of this van. Oh, something else just like to touch on with jobs and stuff. A big thing I didn't even like really think about was sponsorships. These people who like go on these drives, a lot of times it helps them to get like a sponsor. You can put it on the side of your van. You can advertise it in your videos, that kind of stuff. And sponsorship revenue, if you like are one of these bigger channels with like a nicer van, it becomes like a good spot. Like it allows you to continue driving, and that kind of goes with like brand ambassador. But it's like brand ambassador is more of like, oh, I represent this company, whereas sponsor is like, oh, this company pays me to just talk
kind of
about
exist.
them. Which I think is super cool if you could ever do it. But once again, barrier for entry may or may not be genetics.
So it can be really difficult, but I feel like there has to be bright sides. Like people do this, people love this.
For sure.
What do you think those are?
Hold on, I have a whole lot of negatives written down.
Joey doesn't have any good things.
Where are my good
Van
boys?
life sucks is what it says on the end.
It says van life is awful. If you do it, you're a stupid, big old little brain person. Hashtag big brain. No, I mean, like, I think some of the upsides to van life are simply the fact that you get to have a lot of these experiences that people, especially younger people nowadays, like don't get to have. You know, people go directly into college and straight into careers. They don't get to like go out and visit the Grand Canyon and drive all around it and drive up the coast of California or even like go around the country. Like, how many states have you even been to? Like, I haven't been to a ton. I've been to, I'd say probably like 11.
Yeah, like ones that I've like stayed in. Yeah, probably like 10 or so.
Yeah. You know, people who get to go to all 50 states, see the entire country. And like, that's a pretty insane experience, I think. Like, something that a very small percentile of people actually get to do.
Because when I was thinking about van life, and I've never like truly like considered van life as like a reasonable thing, but I was just like, oh, it's something I've been thinking about. Like, I should research it. And I was like, it would be really cool to find like the beauty in every state.
Yeah.
And like go through Kansas and like see the Flint Hills and then go to Nebraska and like see like cornfields before harvest and things like that. Like, it's just like dumb things, but like you could like really see some nice things.
Go to Nebraska and see the corn.
Right? You know?
I've
never seen corn before. Like, what does corn look like?
But yeah, no, I think that is like really beautiful. Like going to every state and staying there long enough to find like the beauty in it or whatever, or traveling around enough to find the beauty in it.
Until you hit a place like Colorado and you're like, oh, it's everywhere.
and I had to really search for South Dakota or whatever, you know. Man, I really had to stretch for Delaware to be beautiful. But Maine, it's everywhere.
Spent a week in Maine, spent 4 months in Delaware.
Yeah, no, I could totally see where it'd be really easy to just like go up the Rockies and then over to the coast and then go down the coast and back over to the Rockies and just like kind of make that loop.
Yeah.
So there's the freedom. You're not tethered to like businesses, to a certain place. I know like my whole life I've grown up moving around because my parents never really felt like they loved a place. And so maybe something like a van life where you could like move around constantly would either be better or it would be super indulgent and they would just never stop moving. But I feel like there is a freedom to that, and there's like a community there, and you are like really tied to nature. And some like the van lifers that like really enjoyed it were like heavy mountain bikers, heavy surfers, things like that. People who had a passion.
Yeah.
And basically anything that got in the way of surfing, they didn't want in their life. And they're like, if we can park right by the beach and just go to different beaches all along the year, then that's perfect and that's worth it for me. It'd be like the same as having like a beach house or living on a resort. But this way you can like stay mobile and not be quite as expensive.
Yeah, it's like there's something really beautiful about that. Like the fact that, oh, I have this thing that I really love. Honestly, just screw whatever else is going on in my life. I'm just going to follow this passion and do whatever I can to just make this my life. The freedom of doing that is definitely something that I don't think a lot of people get to experience. So like that's definitely a pretty good positive.
And I feel like it's really alluring. Like people always want like freedom, and they feel like they're locked down and like, oh, if I just had something different in my life, things would like automatically be better. And that's not always the case, but giving people that opportunity is like just worth it enough. And I think that's why the Instagram people do so well, is because they can like rep this lifestyle and say, hey, like this is the freedom that you could have if you like just took those steps.
Yeah.
When in reality, there is a lot of those negatives behind it. Like there's the like space limitations, not taking a shower all the time, the struggle to find income, things like that. The worry of like parking in a place and not knowing if someone's going to knock on your door in the middle of the night and say, hey, you got to leave.
Yeah. That's like
that would
really
really
tough.
suck.
Like there's a lot of things though. I think I would at this point kind of endorse it if that's the life that somebody wanted to live. I'd be like, yeah, you live your life, you do you. But I do think it's important to note kind of the things that people don't super think about with it, which not to like super bring it down, but I do have a long list. So for one, it's like security. It's super easy to just get broken into if you're not at your vehicle. There's like tons of videos out there of like people parking in places with cameras even, and someone will come and break into their car and or their van and just grab anything that's not tied down. So like that's definitely like an issue. Like, you know, you got to make sure you're parking in places that have cameras for that extra security, or maybe even just going out far enough that nobody would think to come and steal stuff from you.
Definitely. One of the first people I listened to, it was an interview, and the interviewer was like, do you have security measures? Like, do you have a gun? And it was an American talking to an Australian, and they're like, I guess we're just not worried about it. And so I don't know if that's like a uniquely American problem. A lot of what they said was like, yeah, if we just like feel sketched out by an area or we drive through a town, we just feel like there's not going to be that right place, we'll just keep going, because you kind of have that luxury with a van. And it's like, okay, I guess I'll drive for another 2 hours, but then that way I know I can go to like a nice neighborhood and like park in like an actual RV park or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and that is something that's like available, but then you also have to keep in mind like some of those places have a $20 to $40 a night fee if you like do decide to stay in those places. And if you're, you know, trying to save money by living in a van, I mean, that's not always like the greatest option. Something else to note, standing is considered a luxury. So many videos I saw of people who were like in their vans and stuff where it's just like so hunched over. Like I have terrible posture to begin with, but put me in a van and I'm just like crunched up. Like, you know, I'm 6 foot, you're 6'4". It's a pretty small space. Even in like a Sprinter van, I feel like you would probably have to like duck down a little bit.
Whenever I'd watch like tiny houses and stuff, they're like, this is a big tiny house. And I was like, I still couldn't physically stand up in a place like that. And that would be a struggle, but that's kind of where maybe the difference between like van life and bus life is, because I have seen a lot of people like renovate buses as well.
Yeah.
And I know in that sometimes you can get a little more width and height.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like in bus life, it's a whole different hashtag though.
Yeah, it's not big brain. It's, you know, it's small biceps. I don't know. Hashtag biceps.
Hashtag small biceps.
Hashtag bus life. Hashtag small biceps.
I think bus life is big biceps. I think
big biceps.
Yeah, I think big brain, small van.
Hashtag bus boy, hashtag big biceps.
Yeah, hashtag bus boys. Something else to think about is like the fact that like having a luxury van life means having any amenities beyond like a place to sleep and maybe a fridge. Consider like, you know, not having a toilet, not having heating, not having running water, not having electricity or having very little electricity, having to pump your waste if you have waste. And that's something that even applies to like luxury things. Oh yeah, we have a luxury van. We still have to like dump this out every now and then.
Definitely. Yeah. Like one guy, he's like, I pee in a bottle. Like that's not the glamorous side of this. This is not like what people are taking pictures of, but sometimes I got to do that. And that's part where like when you make your own bus or make your own van, you kind of have a little more of those luxuries that like it might not make it like way more expensive, but you can still have the option to turn your sink into a shower or things like that.
Like you have to be like a little bit creative with it, but it's like still you've got those things because you have like thought ahead to like make your own custom thing. But yeah, on like the note of that, like if you're showering outside, you have to think about where you're going and what time of year you're going to be staying in these places. Because weather just rules your life. You will drive around and sometimes you kind of think when you're making your van, oh, I'll just like work outside. Well, sometimes there's a very limited amount of the day where you are able to work outside and like sit on a chair or whatever and get some work done. You know, other times you have to be in your van because it's raining or too hot or too cold. It's like there's just these times when it just isn't reasonable to be able to be outside.
Yeah, I think one of the luxuries of van life is that you have so much time to yourself, you know, cut out all the stuff that like makes a consumerist society, and that leaves you without having to clean like huge places, reorganize all your stuff, worry about like picking new groceries, doing all these chores. But then you have to be very comfortable with yourself, and you have to be like good with being alone, and you also have to be able to like be self-entertained. And especially in the winter months, not only do you have to be self-entertained in the world, but in your van specifically, because the rest of the world is cold and like hostile.
Yeah, and you have to have like some sort of heating measures. This person was talking about how they had a space heater, but they were operating in months during the winter when their solar energy was low. So they couldn't have the space heater on all the time or they would kill their battery entirely. You have to plan kind of around those kind of things, especially if you're moving around a lot. She also mentioned, we touched on it earlier, but burnout. Like, and you brought up a really good point, which is that a good way to avoid burnout is to have a purpose when you're moving around. Like, you know, you mentioned surfers and like hikers and bikers and stuff. It's like, oh, well, if I'm always traveling because of my passion, because it's like about the destinations that I'm going to, as well as like some of the journey along the way, you're going to be less likely to experience that burnout because you're doing it for you. You're doing it for your passions and stuff. But also with people who travel in pairs, you are in close quarters with this person.
Oh, constantly.
All the time.
Like not even close quarters, really close quarters.
Yeah, there's no way away from them. And you have to be A-okay with them. I saw some people who were like trying to put up this like kind of facade of like, oh yeah, you know, we love it, it's all beautiful. But man, I could tell like like when they were talking to the camera.
It's one of those like put the hand on the knee and like instantly pulled away kind
of.
Yeah,
like. Just like, oh, that person talked over that other person and they didn't like it. It's like, oof, what's going on after the camera's off?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I know during like early months of like COVID-19, once like things opened back up, like people got divorces at like a higher rate because they had to be stuck with their significant others.
Then on the note of waste that we talked about earlier, smells, like something I didn't even think about because you see pictures and videos, right? Smells are a huge deal. If you are taking your rag out that you've been using to wash like your dishes, that rag's gonna get a little musty and you're in a small space. Small smells become big smells.
Yeah.
You know, you can smell your waste after your gray water after like a week.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's like you have to like lock up all of your clutter and everything has to have an exact place, because when you're driving, like things can become a catastrophe really quick if you take a turn too sharp. So everything has to be like locked down, hunkered down, and you can't have like extra mess and things like that. And you always have to like sweep and get like crumbs out because your bed is so close to your floor and things like that, where it's so easy just to make a mess in a small place. It just escalates so quickly.
Yeah, and many of these van lifers also enact like a no shoes kind of policy too. It's like, oh, take your shoes off before you come inside, that kind of thing. This person even mentioned putting their like rag inside of a sealed bag every time they like stopped using it. Something that I thought was interesting that neither one of us came across, and I didn't think about it until afterwards, was that no one talked about how they did their laundry, which I assume is like laundromats or washboard. Like I don't know what else they would do, but I thought that was really kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just something that's not terribly inconvenient because a lot of people use laundromats anyways, but you would have to like make a trip into town once a week or so. Well, and you don't have that many clothes because you're living out of a van.
And many of these vans I also saw didn't really cover where they kept their clothes.
Yeah, maybe they just get used to the smells. Maybe they like the smells, you know? It's like, oh, what's a one dirty rag when I smell like a garbage pit myself?
Oof. Oof. Oh, something I thought was really interesting was with burnout and stuff, if you're traveling alone, it's way more likely. But they mentioned that vacations become leaving the van. This girl was talking about how during winter months she got just so cooped up, couldn't leave her van, was really low on motivation. I think she was a graphic designer or something. She went and checked into a hotel for 2 days just so that she could be in a space that was not a van. Wow. That's kind of crazy to think that, like, oh, wow, this is so refreshing. I'm in a Motel 6, you know? Definitely something to think about if you're not, like, great at being your own entertainment and being by yourself in a small space.
Someone that I watched said, like, I feel like you've made it when the van does feel like home. And when you can spend all day hiking around and then you're like, back to the van. And like can be really refreshed by that, where as I'm sure early on, you're like, okay, I got to get cooped back up, got to like refold out my bed, got to put everything back together, things like that.
Really getting into that routine has to be like super important. And I think that's why a lot of these like van life YouTubers are like so good about getting a following from other people even who are in van life, because they show their routines. They're like, I get up every morning and I do yoga. I get up and like I cook this dinner and stuff. And it's like, well, you have to have a routine, otherwise you are becoming less efficient.
And honestly, that might make like YouTube and Instagram a lot easier when you like have such hard routines as it is.
Yeah.
To just like throw in a camera and like, okay, I'm going to bring out my camera for this and I'm going to pull out my microphones for this and I'm going to record myself doing yoga every morning. I'm sure that becomes a lot easier when you actually like have so much extra free time and like, okay, I have all the way till noon to just do my yoga. Like, of course I can pull out a camera and record myself.
They've already allocated that time, but then also think about the fact that everything is now super time consuming because you have to pull out your like portable stove and cook these things. There's no microwave. There's no like that, those kinds of things. It takes up too much space. It takes up too much power. So you end up with, okay, I'm making oatmeal, but I'm making oatmeal like on a stove, or I'm like cooking dinner on a skillet.
But I feel like that's something you adapt to. Like you don't just like have leftover pizza if you live van life kind of thing. You know, you don't have frozen chicken nuggets when you're on van life. One person I saw was like, you're going to get really used to produce because it doesn't need to be refrigerated as often. It lasts a lot longer. And so you're going to want to save your cooler / fridge space for like meats. And so you don't want to like have so many meats that they just go bad.
Yeah. And I think that also like adds to like some of the cost of like the food though. It's like, well, you can't hang on to anything that doesn't last. So like typically things that last a little bit longer take more to like cook and cost a little bit less. So you're going to be paying for this like fresher stuff. Something really interesting that I noted too was like, just like, it seems to me the more I watched was like, oh, van life has to be like a warm weather thing. Like, you can't like van life through like Michigan and Canada like all the time, because they were like, I have a hand pump for my faucet, and if I wanted to wash my hands, wash my produce, and cook it in the morning, it was 30 degrees inside of my van, even with the heater on. So I'm like washing my hands, like taking them out of my mittens that I went to bed in, washing my hands in this ice cold water and heating it up. And like trying to like make this food and stuff, and like trying to make like a bagel because I've given up on making fancy foods, you know, just like, and it takes so much effort to like do that. So, you know, maybe keep that in mind. When that kind of goes in with like the weather rules your life kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think like the biggest van life communities that we're seeing were in SoCal and Australia.
Yeah.
And so I was hearing a lot about Australia, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, the winters aren't nearly as harsh down there.
And I think the last thing I have here on my long list of like just things to kind of think about, maybe not necessarily negatives, they can be negatives if you're not prepared for them, is simply what comes next, you know? Like after your van life, assuming you probably have to like settle down at some point, right?
A lot of van life is like mid-20s, early 30s, or like retirees. I don't think there's a whole lot of like middle-aged people doing van life.
So it's like, what do you do? Like, and a lot of these people are social media influencers and stuff like that. And changing up your content can like be detrimental to your channel health and that kind of stuff, and really damage your income, because it's like, oh, well, I'm not like traveling anymore. And like, how am I supposed to be a lifestyle vlogger if my lifestyle is that of a normal person? So like, you have to kind of think about that, as much as that's not maybe as fun as, you know, driving around in a van, all that. Like if you're a graphic designer, great, you know, like you've got a tool that you can just make money off of already, or like there's plenty of other jobs like we mentioned earlier, like accounting and stuff like that. But like, for those social media influencers and stuff, it's like, well, you probably got to think about like what comes after that, after like driving around in a
But I
van.
feel like most social media influencers kind of have to do that anyways. Like, especially the ones who like rely on their bodies and like their physical appearances. At some point, that doesn't sell as well. And so you have to pivot in some way. And I think that can just be difficult for anyone. Everything that I heard was like, you have to be a special kind of person to van life. And I think what that entails and like what they mean by that, you have to be able to like find joy in like those little things where it's like, okay, I am going to do yoga every morning. It is going to take me an hour to make my breakfast, but then I get to sit down and eat it for an hour. Whereas everyday life is just so like hustle and bustle and you got to move really fast. You wake up 30 minutes before work, or I do, cram a bowl of cereal in and like drive straight to work and things like that. So I think van life, you can really slow down. And I think that's like part of the joy of it. And then like we said earlier, it's about having that passion. You said what comes next, but I think during van life, it's like, why am I doing van life?
Yeah.
And I think that's like the key to success and the key to actually wanting to do it. Is it to see new places? Is it to be able to mountain bike just as much as you can? Because I think that's really important, because like if I were to go on van life, I feel like I'd need a destination.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be satisfied with just like driving from place to place, seeing another set of woods or seeing another mountain. It would be amazing for a while.
Yeah.
But like you could do that for a year and be done. You know, you could see everything you need to see. And so I think there really is some like beauty and joy in it. You just have to be the kind of a person that can find beauty and like taking it slow and just like enjoying the little moments. And like when you break down and just like laughing at it and being able to like adapt and like, okay, now I got to work on my car for the day.
Yeah, finding like it's what rule was that? I forget what rule it was in Zombieland. It was like, it's all enjoy the little things.
Oh yeah, like rule number 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Enjoy the little things. Get yourself that Twinkie.
Yeah, you still that Twinkie. Find the Twinkie in the engine. Realize that's why the engine stopped working, is you put a Twinkie in it. I think at the end of this, after doing all of the research, I am more swayed over to van life than I was in the beginning. Like before, I was like, no way. Never. I had to pee in a bottle and poop in a bucket. I don't know. But after doing the research and kind of understanding a little bit more about like what van life is and like what it means, I don't think I would ever like hashtag big brain, hashtag van life. I think I would probably do it like part-time. I could absolutely see, I'm just going to travel for the summer and work remotely and like do those kind of things. But I think I still would like a home base to come back to.
And honestly, like the first video I watched, it was like, why did I quit van life? And the most important thing they said was at the very end, they're like, just rent a van. Don't buy a van. Like, just rent one, pay by the month or whatever, and see what it's like. And if you love it, get a van. But if you don't, just like treat it like a super long road trip is kind of what I was thinking. And so I was like, yeah, that'd actually be really cool. Just like 3 months, take a summer and like go through the Rockies and down to Arizona and California or whatever and make it a huge road trip. And I think that would be a great way to like get into it, experience it, see some world, escape from the burnout of your everyday life and just see what's out there.
Good way to treat burnout.
Van life seems like it's kind of enticing and could be really fun and really enjoyable.
For sure.
But it's also very scary and you have to think about a lot of things.
No, would you van life with me?
See, about that.
All right,
we're at the end of the podcast. We don't have time to talk about this. Otherwise,
it's fine. I get it.
Check us out on Humorish. I don't know if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, but give us some love. Give us some likes, subscribe, hit
don't
that
forget
notification.
To fucking rate the podcast, bro.
It's so helpful.
It's very nice to see if people rate us or not.
Dude, and throw comments our way. We love to see that stuff. And we got an email. It's
humorish.tm@gmail.com.
Yeah, it is. It's been so long since I've done that. And you just saved it. It felt like old times. You're like, I know I was going to mess this up.
And fun fact, our Humorish network is growing a little bit.
We're getting some friends.
Yeah, so go check out Breaking In. It's on Spotify and iTunes. And go check out Spectacles, a spec script podcast on iTunes and Spotify as well. Show them some love. I'm on both of them, and Noah's on both of them as well. He guests on them. Yeah. So if you guys aren't tired of our voices yet, go check those bad boys out.
Thank you very much, and we will see you when we see you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll see you in your dreams.
I'll see you in your van dreams. Big brain dreams.
Look at that Van Gogh.
Dreams.
Oh my God. We didn't make a Van Gogh reference. Re-record the podcast.
It's over. Start over. We can't add it in. It's done.
Push me out to sea, baby.
Thanks for joining us for this fantastic episode of Noah Asked. The music for this episode was Good to Be Alive by John Coggins and Push Me Out to Sea by Be Brave Benjamins. And we'll see you next time. Bye.